We've been talking a lot, sort of at the micro level, about the Democratic and Republican primaries lately, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the macro today. There's this really interesting dynamic where, for different reasons, the early success of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders scares a lot of people, particularly people in the establishment, in addition to both being pretty inspirational to many people, but again, for very, very different reasons. Bernie Sanders is scaring people who think he's some kind of communist that will oversee a government takeover of private industry. Of course, this is totally absurd. He's a democratic socialist, but he is also the most vocally progressive candidate in a long time to have this level of success in a major party's primary election. And then you have Donald Trump, who scares people because of his attitude towards the establishment, right? Republican insiders are very, very scared of Donald Trump. He's scaring people who don't realize that the entire thing is a pretty well-crafted PR ploy that in many cases doesn't even align with Donald Trump's lifelong positions on so many issues. And I've been alluding to this for a while. I mean, I don't agree with Donald Trump's stated positions on just about anything. His ideas about trade are ridiculous. His xenophobic nativist dog whistles are absurd. But my sort of baseline belief is that most of the stuff Trump is running on is just a brilliant PR ploy to appeal to low information voters. Trump has been very outspoken over the last 20 years about how if he were to run someday, he would know exactly what to say and who it would appeal to, and how he would be able to coalesce a sizable portion of the Republican Party in exactly the way that he's doing today. Now, Bernie Sanders is the total opposite, right? He's running a campaign appealing to higher information voters who aren't going to be dissuaded by hearing that he's a, quote, socialist. They understand he's talking about the sort of democratic socialization of certain elements of society, healthcare, for example, education, etc. But of course, private industry would continue to exist. It would not be socialism. It would not be communism. The similarities between Trump and Sanders on policy are very, very minimal. They both sort of had similar ideas on foreign policy and the taking down of dictators abroad, or of propping up who we consider to be the moderates. They were actually really similar on that. But at least as far as their stated policies, they're really quite different. They both are generally populist in their language, though. And the underlying reality about what they both represent is huge change in American politics, right, Lewis? I mean, if Trump were to win, he would show you can come in with essentially no political experience other than donating to candidates to get political favors, essentially no real plans, a very limited understanding on a number of issues, and basically using the reality show bully character to push yourself into power. If Bernie Sanders were to win the nomination, it would confirm what polls show us, which is that the country is moving generally to the left, that being the old money candidate with the establishment ties to the Democratic Party wouldn't necessarily be the fast track into the White House. So those realities, Lewis, are very scary to the establishment in both the Democratic and Republican side. And it's very interesting how we have an example in either party simultaneously really shaking up what we consider to be the status quo of the two-party system.
And I think it's a wonderful thing on both sides. But I think Bernie, just being in the position he's in now, is proof enough that the country is moving to the left and wants more progressive policies. So he doesn't need to be elected. He's already achieved a great deal. He's already changed the conversation. It's wonderful.
Now let's talk about anger, right? In different ways, both Trump and Sanders are capitalizing on anger. Bernie Sanders has said, when asked about his anger, he's not an angry person, but he is angry about what has happened to our country, being taken over by special interests, the 1%, big corporations. And Donald Trump has also played on anger, saying he is a nice guy, but he is angry about how the U.S. doesn't win anymore against China and Japan and all that stuff with pretty limited meaning, but it's had a really big impact. Two candidates whose platforms have very little in common, except for what I mentioned earlier, and in some ways maybe on healthcare, sort of, as we discussed. The rhetoric is very similar in terms of how it is impacting the establishment. It is completely undeniable that if Donald Trump and Bernie both lose their respective nominations, they still will have made huge impacts on U.S. electoral politics by having gotten this far.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's just an interesting time. And if imagine if they square off against each other in the general election. However unlikely that may be, that would just be incredible.